All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just another minute or two here. Give everybody the last second opportunity to join since we started. So just bear with us for another minute or two. All right, so go ahead and get started. Before I turn things over to today's presenters, just a quick note that we are recording today's webinar and it will be posted to the ESA website tomorrow afternoon. Everybody is in listen-only mode. All attendees are muted. Just with this many people on the line, it can be a little bit cumbersome to have people unmuted. If you do have a question, you can use the question function in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll collect those questions and we'll have time for question and answer at the end of today's webinar. So with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Erin Cadwallader.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Erin Cadwallader. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for ESA. My apologies for the confusion about the start time. We continue to learn something new with each of these webinars that we host. So we're delighted to have you joining us today for the inaugural event of our Professional Advancement Career Training, or PACT, initiative. What does that mean, you might be asking yourself? Anecdotally, we've heard from our industry and government partners that entomology graduate students come onto the job market with fantastic technical skills, but are often a little weaker in the soft skills needed to succeed in these sectors, which tend to rely on highly collaborative environments and hierarchy. The irony, of course, is that the lone wolf kind of independence that you must usually demonstrate in order to obtain a PhD is kind of at odds with any of the jobs that you'll get after you graduate or finish your postdoctoral training. And this is especially true of jobs outside of academia. This is a lesson I actually was surprised to learn myself when I left the bench about 10 years ago. I assumed anybody in a management position received some kind of formal training on how to manage others, and that is just not true. So given the current challenges imposed by the pandemic and the long-term consequences this may have on increasing competition for the kind of jobs you'll be looking for, since I expect the university hiring will take years to recover from the pain and contraction caused by this year, we wanted to find a way to help prepare our students to be as competitive as possible when looking for their next position. So to this end, the PACT initiative. First off, let me explain that we are still in the process of formulating this. So the details are fluid, not final. But we felt this was an important webinar to offer before the annual meeting, so think of it as a soft launch. Thank you to all of you on today that responded to this survey that I sent around, because your input has been invaluable to us as we try to identify what needs you guys see for yourselves as well. For the initiative itself, we're envisioning a mix of content, which you'll be able to find at the website listed here, as well as a more formal program that will require competitive application and a certificate of completion at the end, and the duration of which will be about 6 months. Each month we'll plan to address a different topic through mostly webinars and guided small group discussions with selected readings. And then we're in the process of trying to secure enough mentors so that we can have a one-to-one match of participants and a mentor from another sector outside of the one with which they're currently affiliated. We'll continue to release more information on this, both through our newsletters at ESA and also through the website. So please keep an eye on the site if you're interested in participating. For today's webinar, we are joined by Natalie Skyberg, a recruiter from Bayer, who has been an instrumental part of our efforts to plan this initiative. She's in a very unique position as she knows exactly how students in general present themselves and wants to help you figure out how to put your best forward at the start. This means knowing what to expect throughout the entire process and how to prepare for each step along the way in order to help you land the job you want. We'll be accepting questions through the question tab throughout the webinar and addressing them at the end. We'll also be conducting a couple of fun polls throughout the webinar, and those answers will be revealed at the end of the presentation too. So on behalf of myself and ESA, I'd like to personally thank Natalie for making time to do this today, as I know it's a really busy time for her as well. And with that, Natalie, over to you.
So good morning, everyone. I want to thank Erin and ESA for allowing Bayer for us to present today and hopefully provide knowledge that you will be able to use in the real world situation. I'm excited to spend the next hour with you. My name is Natalie Skyberg, and I have been with Bayer for the last 4 years. I am a senior recruiter with Bayer Crop Science. Prior to that, I have 16 years of recruiting in the medical and pharmaceutical industry. And today, I'm going to share with you the best tips on how to have a successful interview. We're going to review the process from start to finish, covering resume writing, the cover letter, the interview, the new normal in today's world with a virtual setting, and also talk about how to accept the offer. So let's jump right in. We're going to review, first of all, the elevator speech, the resume, and the cover letter. These are all areas that you want to brag about yourself. This is your bait to land the interview. So you want to throw your information out there and have the managers interested in you, but not provide all of the details or give that away quite yet. You want to wait that until your interview. So let's talk about the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is an introduction where you can use and sum up your skills and qualifications. If you're looking for a job, let them know what you're looking for. Start with, you want to introduce yourself, state which college you attended or graduated from, mention your skill set and how you are unique or how your skill set is unique. Describe what you are hoping to do in your career or what you want to do with your degree. Make sure before you start your elevator pitch that you know your audience, because it is important what you're going to put in your elevator speech and how you are going to deliver it. So make sure that you know your audience. If you're looking for a job, provide the benefits that you would bring to the company as an employee. You want to make sure that you practice your elevator speech over and over again. I cannot stress this enough. You want to have it memorized. Remember, you want to speak slowly. You don't want to come off like it is rehearsed. You don't want to use complicated terminology or slang. Again, know your audience. I can't stress that enough. If you're talking to a recruiter, you don't want to dive too much into your technical background. You want to make it simple on what type of roles you're looking for and what your degree is. Mention any internships you did or what experience you have. If you're talking to a scientist or a hiring manager, then you can jump in and talk more about your technical abilities. You want to make sure that you speak friendly, use eye contact, and always keep a business card or a resume with you so you can hand that out after your elevator speech. So I'm going to go ahead. If you see below, there is an example where you can fill in your information on how to practice for your elevator speech. I'm going to give just a simple one here on how to demonstrate it. So you can take notes right here as you are going through and fill in your information. But the example that I have is, hi, my name is Natalie Skyberg, and I'm graduating in December of this year with a kinesiology degree in the area of sports psychology from Purdue University. I am interested in working with college athletes as a possible career. In addition to taking classes, I have spent my time volunteering with sports club organizations and working with high school students. I completed an internship with the St. Louis Cardinals, and my skills include working with athletes on topics of anxiety and energy management and self-talk. Here's my resume, and I look forward to learning about a position that you have available with your company. What is the best way that I can get in touch with you? So hopefully that gives you an idea of an elevator speech, and you want to practice it over and over again. Like I said, I cannot stress that enough. So you have it down. So when you run into somebody in an elevator, in any professional setting, or if you're in a face-to-face situation, or now a virtual situation in today's world, you have your elevator speech prepared. The resume. I'm not going to spend too much time on the resume itself today because that could be an entire session on its own. But I'm going to give you some key points that you could focus on. Make sure that you have your resume on a white piece of paper. Use black ink. Normally, we prefer, as a recruiters, 12 font. You don't want to make it too small so that it's unable to be read, but at the same time, you don't want to make it too large. So 12 font is usually what we recommend. Maybe if you have to do something in bold or your university or your titles, maybe you could do that in 14 font, but nothing larger than 14. It is important to make sure all of that your contact information is at the top of the interview, at the top of your resume. I don't know how many times I get a resume that doesn't have contact information. It has the candidate or student's name, and then it goes right into the experience or education. Make sure that you have your contact information at the top. That should include your cell phone number and email, most importantly. I would advise that you would put an address because it really helps the recruiter or company know where you're based. Now, for private information, I will tell you that you don't necessarily need to have your exact address on there. So you don't need to have your street or the number of your address on there. But I would recommend that you would put, for example, St. Louis, Missouri, and then your zip code. So that way they know where you are located, but you don't have to share your full address. For the objective you could have on your resume, or if you are handing out resumes in a career fair and you don't know exactly what specific opportunities you are looking for, then your objective, you can have it either as a vague objective or you can just skip your objective. But your objective, when you're applying for a certain position, you want to make sure that the objective states the position behind the information, or you include that in your objective statement. When you're talking about your education, you want to make sure that your education goes in reverse chronological order. You want to make sure that you want to start with your most recent degree. So if that's a PhD, start there. Then go backwards. So you would go down to your master's and then go back to your bachelor's degree. I would make sure that you have all of your education listed on your resume. Same thing with experience. You want to make sure that you start with your experience and go in reverse chronological order. So your experience should be something that you are doing currently or you did most recently, and then go backwards. Achievements, you want to make sure you have your achievements on the resume, and any honors or awards that you have as well. As far as activities, it's a good idea to include activities. This is definitely a conversation breaker that you can use. But at the same time, you also want to remember to avoid anything politically or any religious type of activities. I would suggest you use a bullet point format. Again, you do not want to overload your resume or have too much information on your resume. You want to make sure that you provide enough information on your resume to have the company and hiring manager attracted and want to bring you in, attracted to your resume and want to bring you in for an interview, but you don't want to give all of your details away in your resume. Cover letter. The purpose of the cover letter is to find out what will motivate the reader, company, or hiring manager to interview you. I will tell you that recruiters are not big on cover letters. Most of the time, to be honest with you, I don't even read the cover letter. So if you put one on there, I won't read it. However, some hiring managers and some companies do. So it is important to have one. What you want to do is you want to most importantly put what role or job that you are applying for, state your qualifications and highlights, show something about the excitement about the company or role, and provide your contact information. That's simply what should be on a cover letter. Okay, so it's time for our first poll question. What is the average number of applicants per job opening? And I'll give it about 10 seconds here for you to answer, and then we're going to provide these answers at the end. Now we're going to jump into the interview. In the interview, this is where the hiring manager and company identify the best candidate for the role. We're going to spend a lot of time on interviewing. This is also where you need to spend your most time. You need to prepare, plan, and practice. Yes, I said practice. We're going to go over that later. Know the company you're interviewing for. Know the name of the company, the headquarter location, current events, and news articles about the company. Know the job description so you can justify your skill set for the role. If it is an in-person interview, bring multiple copies of the resume. Do not assume that the interviewer will have a copy. Also, you don't know how many people you might be interviewing with. You might be seeing 3 people and 1 person might come in at the end of the interview. You want to provide them with a resume. So make sure that you have multiple copies, more than enough, and bring them with you to the interview. The next 3 steps we're going to go into more thoroughly in the next few slides. We're going to talk about how to anticipate questions and how to prepare, how to make sure that you have questions to ask, and then talk about practicing or mock interviews. There are basically 2 different types of interviews. One is a behavioral or situation type of interview. The second is a traditional interview. Behavioral type of interview is where you're going to share your past behaviors and provide your experience in certain situations. Traditional interviewing is when the interviewer assesses your actual abilities and skill sets. So these are going to be more technical questions. Most students and interviewees have a more difficult time with the behavioral type of interviews. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about this. Why do we use behavioral type of interviews? Everybody hates them. The standard answer is past behavior predicts future behavior. But do you want to know a secret? Companies use behavioral-based interview questions because they provide the best structure and consistent outcome for good hires, for managers that are not interviewing experts. You want managers to use these type of level of playing field. It provides the structure to make sure managers are hiring on your skills and not just their gut. Because data tells us hiring from the gut is wrong over 50% of the time. Why? Let's just say, this is an example. Mr. Johnson is from a an accounting manager hiring for an accounting clerk job. Mr. Johnson isn't an interview expert. He's an accountant. He only maybe hires 3 to 4 positions a year. He interviews Jimmy. Jimmy, on his resume, he puts that one of his interests is playing in a band. Mr. Johnson plays the guitar too. They spend 20 minutes of the 50-minute interview talking about music. Because that they shared a common interest, Mr. Johnson connected with Jimmy, and this tells the hiring manager that he should hire him. That is what his gut is saying, not realizing that he interviewed Johnny to be a musician and not to be an accounting clerk. Long story short is that behavioral type of interviews are your friend. They help us find the right people, and they help you find the right job. Now that you understand why we frame these questions in this way, let's talk about how you should frame your answers. Statistically, the behavioral type of interviews use the STAR method. And the STAR method, we're going to go over what STAR means. You want to be using a story or giving a specific answer or an experience when you're answering behavioral type of questions in the STAR format. STAR, S, stands for situation. T stands for task. What problem did you need to solve when you were handling or in a situation? A stands for action. What did you do? What was your thought process? And how did you decide on that action? And R is the result. Result, so many people forget this part. What was the result? Where did the possible measurables with references happen, and what was needed to achieve this result? So situation, task, action, result. This is the STAR method. I'm sure you've heard about behavioral questions and STAR methods before, but I want to give you 2 examples, and you tell me which you think is better. Tell me a time when you have a group collaborate as a team. So I'm going to give you answer 1 and answer 2. Answer 1. And remember the question, give me a time when you had to collaborate as a team or a group. I have to do this all the time. When I am working with a group, I always try to get the first consensus on what we are trying to achieve so we have clear goals. Then working in a group, see where the other members' strengths and passions lie and leverage those. Who is really good at data collection? Who is good at idea generation? Who's best at presenting? And who's a natural project planner? Allowing everyone to participate and use their strengths ultimately gives you the best results. Sounds pretty good. Number 2. I was part of our rush team last year for my sorority. Our pledge numbers have been trending down, and we knew we needed to revamp our strategy. It was particularly hard because we had several senior members of our sorority and that had sentimental attachments to our events and didn't want to change much. I spent time facilitating, brainstorming, and having conversations where the whole group could share their ideas, where they really liked and what they thought they could improve on. As a team, we landed and identified on a few key events where data showed us that where the interest falls off. Then we focused on updating those events and having better representation on joining our sorority and what we could do to have more potential pledges. This kept us from some of our beloved events and also it attracted and kept us intact for looking for better pledges and results. I'm happy to say that we were able to take a full pledge class this year, something we hadn't done in the previous 4 cycles, and the new committee leveraged most of our changes for a full pledge class this year as well. Number 2 answer, that was good too. So you can see that both of them are solid answers, but the first one tells me that the education was around collaboration. You studied how to do it. The second one shows me how the person actually implemented their knowledge. Because of where you are in your career, you might not always have an example to use in a professional situation. But in that case, you can show and know the concepts and be excited to take that knowledge into action from your experiences, and that's totally fine. So if you have a concrete answer, use it. It doesn't always have to be in a professional industry environment. So hope that gives you examples of how to answer that type of question. Interviewing prep. So when you're interviewing, you want to make sure that we have, and we've talked about this already, that you want to make sure that you're prepared. You want to come up with 10 different stories that exemplify your skills and your abilities. You also want to come up with 4 stories of things that didn't go well. And with those stories, you want to make sure that you turn it around. So if something didn't go well, what did you learn from that scenario? What was the result? And how are you going to change that? So make sure that you think about these stories ahead of time, and that it also will prepare you on the questions that were going to be answered. You don't know what questions the interview is going to ask, but if you come prepared with 10 stories with your skills and abilities, and you come with 4 examples that didn't go well, you're putting yourself in a much better situation of being prepared. These stories should last about 3 to 5 minutes. So they shouldn't go over that time, because that's too much information and you're probably not staying on task and answering the question at hand. So you want to practice these 10 stories, the 4 stories, and keep it within that 4 minutes. And it's called the 10-4-4 rule. 10 stories, 4 stories, 4 minutes. Think about the 10-4-4 rule. Also, I know when you're interviewing, you always want to use I and not we. You want to make sure that you use I, because you want to express, and this is where you want to brag about yourself. You don't want to come off cocky, you want to come off confident, but show what skills and what results you did, not we. I understand we can come off as a team, and you always want to work in a team environment, and you can use that throughout the answers, but you want to stress on I, what you did, what I did in the scenario, what I did in the project, what I did to come up with the result. So it's okay to use we, but try to stress on using I. This again is the 10-4-4 rule, the interview prep. Do you have questions? Do you want to ask questions in the interview? Absolutely. You want to ask about the company culture. Ask the manager, why do they like working here? What does success look like in this role? With this question, you really get an idea from the hiring manager on what the day-to-day role is and what the manager is looking for. And then you can answer your questions to specifically for those type of questions, or for the questions that the managers are asking. So what does success look like? What is the best or worst part about this job? Yes, you want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's okay to ask that. Why is this role open? You want to find out if this is open due to a replacement, or if this is open due to a promotion, or if this is a new role within the organization. And what are the next steps? What to expect? So you can ask this on a phone interview. You can ask this in a first face-to-face, a second face-to-face, or a final. What are the next steps in the hiring process? Ask for the job. I cannot stress this enough. You want to close the interview by asking for the job. If you do not ask, you don't receive. So many people don't do this, and it's a great way to differentiate yourself from other applicants. Have you ever been on a first date when you thought things went well, but you went home and you had no idea if the person was actually going to call you back for a second date? It's not a great feeling, right? The same applies here with companies when you are interviewing. Let them know that you're interested. Wow, I was really impressed with the way that we talked today. I think I could really use my skills and leverage my talents in this role. Based on what we have discussed, are there any other areas of my background or hesitations or questions that you have that I could clarify for you? This also gives you a second shot to cover any area or skills or competencies the panel thinks you might be light on. So make sure you ask for the job. Now, interviewing is a new normal. Most of the interviews are going to be virtual right now. So we're going to talk a little bit specifically about interviewing in today's normal and how to prepare for that. First of all, we're going to talk about how to prepare with technology. Make sure that you test your equipment, your links, your audio, and your video. Unplug internet siphons. Try to unplug everything within your household so that your bandwidth is faster. A backup plan, flexibility. If for some reason you don't have video or audio or something within the computer that you're supposed to be, either on Skype or on Teams that is not working, have a backup plan. If it's not working on your computer, maybe have the interview over the phone. What to wear. Make sure that you wear a professional interviewing outfit when you are on camera. Make sure that your lighting is correct and that your outfit goes well with your video. So in other words, make sure that you do not have, salads are usually better. You want to make sure that you don't have too crazy of a print that is going to lead the eye to more of your apparel than more of just having a simple conversation and focusing on the face and eye contact, even though that it is over video. That brings me to make sure that you're focusing on the camera when you're talking. Make connections and be authentic. So even though that it is over a video, you can still bring through and show your true personality. And screen share. Make sure that you prepare that if you do need to share your screen, if you do need to share your resume, if you do have a presentation or a PowerPoint, that you practice that ahead of time and that you're prepared. And also, this is going to be a question, but ask the manager, what are the return to work plans? So if the position or company is working virtually right now, what are the return to work plans for both the company and that specific role? So these are interviewing tips on interviewing in today's new normal world. I have one more slide, and it's going to go over a couple of things that are a little bit more specific. And these are just a couple of reminders. There were a lot, so I made it on 2 slides. Make sure that you have a distraction-free environment. So be mindful of your setting and ensure that there's a good light behind your video and a sensible background. Close your email. Make sure that you turn off all of your silence or mobile devices so that they're not ringing in the background, and check your test your connection. We talked about dress professionally. Another thing is make sure that you're prepared on time so that you do make sure that make sure that you're on time when you're actually connecting with the interviewer. Plan ahead, have your resume, your questions, and paper for notes. Make sure that you have a good introduction, so your elevator pitch. Good eye contact. Assume that you'll be taking notes, so make sure that you have a piece of paper in front of you. Participate, obviously, in the questions as you would answer them in an in-person interview. Ask about back to work plans, and make sure that you send a thank you note or email after the interview. Okay, we're ready for another poll question. How many days do most interview processes last within the US? So I'll give you a couple of seconds before we move on. The last piece of information is the offer. So this is a contract when you're accepting your employment. There are 3 steps in the offer process. The verbal offer. This is the verbal offer that is given to you either by the hiring manager or a recruiter. The next step is accepting the verbal offer. Before you accept the verbal offer, this is when you have time to ask questions, negotiate the salary, negotiate anything that you would need to negotiate, and we'll talk about that in a minute, if it is vacation time or working from home or a virtual situation. So anything that you would need to negotiate, you would do at this time. And then also signing the contract. So let's talk about number 2. The verbal offer is when that is made. And then these questions are all questions that you want to make sure that you ask before you actually accept. Is the salary negotiable? If you're not happy with the salary that's given to you and you think that it needs to be changed, you need to make sure that you ask for a different salary and have a justification behind it of why you're asking for it. When is the start date? And if there is a differentiating in start date where there are different options, what works best for you, what works best for the hiring manager, what works best for all parties? Do employees have annual bonuses? And if so, how are they paid out? So you want to make sure, ask how you get the bonus, how are they achieved, and when are they paid out? Vacation days or holidays, you want to ask what are days are provided to you when you accept the role and how they are accumulated. Does unused vacation or your annual vacation days roll over into the next year? Employee benefits, what are those? When do they start? And what are included in all of the benefits, not just medical, dental, and vision. You want to make sure that you're asking for all of the benefits that are included. When do the benefits start? Are there professional and growth opportunities? This might be a good question that you might ask during the interview. What are your working hours, especially if they're virtual or remote, and if there's any flexibility? Are employees expected to work on weekends or public holidays? When will you be paid? So is that bi-weekly or monthly? And when do you need a decision date by? So if you ask all of these questions, or if you don't know the answers to these questions, please ask, make sure that you get those, because once you give a verbal offer, you really do want to commit to the company. And then the next step is to sign your contract or your offer agreement. Now I would like to introduce Ashley Stewart. She was a student last year at the ESA conference in St. Louis in 2019, and she is now an employee at Bayer. So I am excited to have her participate in this presentation, and she's going to share her experience from transitioning from a student into breaking into the industry. So Ashley?
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Natalie, and thank you for all the really great information so far. I would have liked to have, been able to talk with you last year as I was going through this process myself. So as Natalie mentioned, I'm Ashley Stewart, and I am in the cotton insect resistance management role at Bayer, and I'm part of the global resistance management team. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I just wanted to go quickly through my background and then talk about some of the soft skills that help me translate into my current role at Bayer. So for my background, I earned my master's in entomology at the University of Nebraska, and my project focused on using RNA interference in the Colorado potato beetle. And then I went to Ohio State and I earned my PhD in translational plant sciences. And my PhD project focused on soybean and soybean aphid molecular interactions and trying to understand the mechanisms that soybean aphids use to adapt to host plant resistance. So as Natalie mentioned, in my current role at Bayer, I am relatively new. So I started in this role in May of this year after I graduated with my PhD in December. And so if we think about that timeline and we look at the pictures that I am showing here, I started this role mid-pandemic. So I have been working remotely from home this entire time, and also just happened to start with a brand new family. So my husband and I had our daughter, Addie, in February this year. So here I was transitioning out of graduate school, starting this role during a pandemic remotely, and also with a brand new baby. But it's been a really great experience so far, and I've really had a lot of support within Bayer. So the role that I hold now is within regulatory science. And some of my responsibilities include collaborating with academics and others, both inside and outside of Bayer, to develop IRM-related studies. And so what those might include would be, for example, trying to establish the dose of a BT product, but then also on the insect side of things, really trying to understand and tease apart a lot of the aspects of the insect's biology. So for example, where does it overwinter, how many generations a year, these types of things. And so all these data that we generate through our different collaborations within and outside the company are then taken, and they're used to develop our IRM or our durability plans for our new products. And so with this IRM plan, we are able to make a recommendation for our refuge strategy, and then also be able to predict how long that BT product is estimated to be durable in the landscape before insect resistance develops. So after we develop this durability plan, part of my responsibility too is to help write all of that up and then submit that to EPA's approval. And so as graduate students, doing high quality research is really important and really critical, and it's going to set the foundation for your scientific training. But then if you think about my background and my current role, what you're doing as a graduate student is not going to be what you're doing after you transition into industry or your next role, wherever that might be. And so I think I'm an example of that, where my training is more in molecular biology and in different systems with Colorado potato beetle and soybean aphid. And now I'm working within regulatory science, which is a new area for me. And I'm also in a different system altogether. So I'm working in the cotton system. And so how do we transition from a graduate student working very intensely on a project and very technically for many years into your new role into industry? And I think that's where developing your soft skills is really important and can really set you apart. And so what those include is communication, and that's probably one of the most, if not the most important soft skill. So as graduate students, we are given a lot of opportunities, really great opportunities to demonstrate that we can communicate our research from a technical perspective. So we present our project to our committee, and we present our projects at ESA. But also we need to learn and take advantage of opportunities where we are communicating to different types of audiences. So for example, in my role, I need to communicate with others within Bayer that are more on the commercial side. And so they're interacting with growers, and they're training is going to be, and their background is going to be different than mine. And so they won't have the same technical training that I have. So instead of communicating the science from a technical level, to be able to take that and translate that into what it means and why it's important, and focus on getting that message across. Other soft skills that become really important and that you have to be able to illustrate when you go through your interview process include leadership, and just as important as leadership is teamwork, and being able to demonstrate that you can be a team player and move projects forward. Other soft skills include problem solving. So of course, as graduate students, we run into walls, we run into problems. How do you react when that happens? How are you able to take a problem and think about these stories, as Natalie mentioned, ahead of time, ahead of your interview, so that you can demonstrate, okay, I ran into this issue and this is how we navigated it moving forward. Also, you want to be able to demonstrate that you are effective in both time and project management. So as graduate students, this might mean getting involved in different types of committees, or maybe you can demonstrate that, I had a greenhouse project at the same time that I was working on a bioinformatics project and, trying to write up my last publication. Another crucially important soft skill is networking and staying in touch, especially I think as graduate students, ESA provides a really great opportunity for you to network with those in industry. You can attend presentations, stay afterwards and ask questions, these kinds of things. And it's also really important to stay in touch and make sure you maintain those relationships. And then finally, ask lots of questions. And so Natalie touched on this already. This is going to be really important in your interview. You don't want to be in a situation where you do a really good job showcasing yourself and all your soft skills, and then it gets to the point to ask questions and then you don't have any. So what I did was, I drafted a short list of questions that were specifically for HR, and then a short list of questions that were more technical that were for the team and the hiring manager. And asking questions and networking, all these things really remain increasingly important as you do transition into your new role. So I mentioned that I'm within regulatory science. This is a new area for me. So, I make sure that I have established mentors that can help me and teach me in this area, and I'm not afraid to ask questions. And you kind of have to put your pride aside and be willing to learn from others. And on the flip side too, I've also found that most people are very welcoming of this, and that usually people are excited and they want to teach you and help you learn and get you brought up to speed. And back to you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was some really good information and valuable information for these students to take away with your transition. So thank you for sharing. Our next question is our answers to our poll questions. So let me see if we are able to bring up the answers that the polls actually provided the answers.
Natalie, I have those ready if you're not able to pull them up.
Sure, go ahead and share with us if you don't mind. Obviously, I have the
Yep.
answers on here, but I'm curious to see what the results came in at with the poll.
Sure. So for the first poll, which the question was, what is the average number of applicants per job opening? 6% of attendees thought it was 13, 29% thought it was 26, 38% thought it was 42, and 29% thought it was 58. So the answer was B, 29 applicants. For our second poll question, which was how many days do most interview processes last in the U.S.? 6% thought it was 62 days, 25% thought it was 10 days, 28% thought it was 23 days, and 41% thought it was 35 days. And the answer for Glassdoor is C, 23 days. So people did pretty well in both of those.
Okay, that's interesting. So the answers were kind of across the board. So interesting with those poll questions, and thank you for sharing that with us. All right, so our next slide is going to bring us to our questions and answer session. So that provided all the information to you. So hopefully you're able to take away some good information today. We are going to now open this up to questions and answers. I believe there's some questions that came in on the chat, and we're going to talk about those and see if we can answer those for you.
Yeah, so this is Erin. I encourage you guys to ask any questions while you've got Natalie and Ashley here. They've been really informative and have answered all of the questions that have come in so far. So does anyone else have any questions that you haven't asked that you would like to have addressed? You know,
I do notice that a few people have their, oh, sorry, go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, I was going to say, I see people raising your hands, but please submit questions through the question box on the GoToWebinar app. That way we can kind of address them that way without having to mess around with speakers and volume control. Oh, great. Okay. So we have one question asking, how important is it to have publications after your PhD to transition to industry, presumably during a postdoc?
Very important. So I apologize that I did not address that with the resume. But yes, you do want to make sure that you do put all of your publications. I would put that at the end of your resume and have those all properly listed. Great question.
Great. And another individual is asking for clarification on the stage at which you negotiate, when the offer is made or when you accept the offer.
No, you never want to accept an offer until you negotiate. So if you're accepting something and you're not accepting what you want. So you want to make sure that you negotiate before you verbally accept. Now, you can do that in a positive way to let them know that you're very interested in the role and working for the company. However, and this is where you're going to use your justification, with my experience, my education, my internships, from the research that I have done online and throughout other companies, I would like to ask for another $5,000 added to my base salary, and this is the reason why. And then usually what they will do, and with our companies and other companies that I've worked with, is usually the recruiter actually has to go back to the compensation team and see if that is negotiable. Sometimes it is negotiable, sometimes it is not. And then usually it takes about a 24-hour process to come back with a new offer. If you decide to, with a new offer, accept at that time, then you would accept verbally. They might come back and say, unfortunately, with internal equity or with the circumstances given, or this is, you know, a flat amount, we're not able to increase the salary, then you would have to decide if you're going to verbally accept or not. So answering the question is, you do not want to accept until you negotiate, but you can let them know your passion or interest or excitement for the job.
Another one of our participants asks, to get hired at Bayer or any other industry affiliate, how important is it to know someone inside the company? Or would you say that outside applicants that don't know someone that work at Bayer or another industry partner still have a good shot at getting hired?
Absolutely, everybody's on the same playing field. Does it help to know somebody within the company? Sometimes it does, and really for the situation of finding out more about the company, what the company's like, what it's like to work there, what's the culture of the company, etc. So a lot of times, you know, it's not going to help get you into the company per se, because everybody's going to interview on a level playing field. But at the same time, as much information as you can gather from your networking, whether it's one person or several within the company, it's always going to be valuable.
Great. Another participant asks, most of the Bayer position advertisements, oops, sorry, it's moving away from my screen, mentioned does not provide visa sponsorship. Does that mean that internationals with a temporary visa cannot apply?
It depends on what the posting says. So if it posts on there that sponsorship is not available, then unfortunately it usually is not. And there's usually a couple of circumstances for that reason. A lot of times this is definitely going back to the government right now we're actually making and working with the government on a lot of changes that are coming from the government over the last actually 2 months. A lot of changes are going on, and then also you know, within the company, it depends on the timing that we need to have, because sometimes sponsorship can be a process that can be delayed for hiring. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on individual circumstances. And then also sometimes the cost as well. So sometimes the businesses, you know, if it is a niche role, are provided, you know, able to provide more money towards that cost. Sometimes if it's a generic role, they're unable to provide that money. So it's all different circumstances, and the reason that it states if it's provided or not, it's not usually just one reason. But like I said, if it states it's not available, unfortunately it's not. If it is available, then it is.
Does spending more time or more professional time in academia, such as having multiple postdocs, hurt your chances of being viewed as a good fit for an industry position?
No, I don't think so. So everybody has to change industry. You know, if they went from academia into industry, I don't necessarily think it depends on what type of your, you know, what time of your career it is. Some roles will, you know, want so many years of experience in industry experience. And sometimes when they say industry experience, they will mean in, you know, not including academia. So they want somebody that has maybe 5 years of industry experience for a corporate type of company. So
building on that, oops, sorry. Yeah,
No,
I say building on that, another question was, there are positions I'm interested in that have minimum requirements that I don't fulfill. How flexible are the minimum requirements?
Depends on what company you're interviewing for. Some companies, you know, they will put on the requirements and you might be able to get away with those. I'm answering this from a Bayer perspective. Bayer, if we have minimal requirements, it's absolutely required that you do meet those requirements for government standards. So it is a compliance issue as regards to Bayer. The minimum requirements that we do put on the job need to be met. Not all companies that I've worked for in the past are regulated exactly through or don't report to the government, so therefore they have a little bit more flexibility.
What are your thoughts on sending an email after an interview to the interviewer?
100% must do. You always want to follow up with a thank you note. You should email the interviewer or interviewees, interviewers, all of them is what I'm trying to say, sorry. So if there's, you know, one person or if there's 5, you want to try to somehow get the email addresses and interview them, thanking them for their time, showing your interest in the position and why you would be a good fit. And that should always be done 24 hours after the interview takes place.
This question is directed to Ashley. How many publications did you have before being offered a position at Bayer?
Let me think. So I would have had a couple co-author, and at the time, I think I had one first author and one that was in review, another first author in review. So just a couple. And I was coming straight from PhD. So I did a one month actually postdoc between finishing my PhD and starting here. But I think it's more than just publications, right? So you have to, of course, you want to demonstrate, you know, that you have publications, but then also, you know, I had other experiences. So I had done 2 internships in industry. I highlighted those in the types of projects I worked on. I also had secured grant funding at a couple different levels. So, you know, just being able to illustrate that you can take a project and write it up and communicate it in that way. And then also, you know, as we've talked about extensively today, you know, demonstrating your soft skills and involvement in ESA and these kinds of things.
Great. Another individual asks, you know, you mentioned to avoid including political activities on your resume, but this individual has been very active in the science policy organizations at their university. Does that fall under politics in your example, or do you mean more specifically affiliation with political parties and lobbying?
More specifically with political parties and lobbying.
When it comes to advantages, sorry.
Especially this time of year and this week.
Yeah. When it comes to advantages to having a master's versus a PhD, how does Bayer kind of weigh those two different sets of skills and values when you're looking for candidates? We received several questions about this, so I'm trying to synthesize a bunch of them kind of into one.
Okay, and I'll answer with mine, and maybe Ashley, if you don't mind, maybe chiming in what you think too, as well as that relates to the role, because really that is what it does relate to. The positions that we post and when they have minimal requirements of a master's or a PhD is really what is required. So if it only requires a master's, then we're very open to a master's degree. You don't have to have a PhD. And then if you come on board within the organization and you want to look for opportunities for promotion or advancement within, so that is okay. You don't necessarily have to have a PhD. The opportunities that do require a PhD must have a PhD. So there are usually the more scientific roles within the different organizations or divisions that technically and skill set wise are going to require a PhD. Most of the time, and Ashley can chime in with after me, with the master's degree, it's different roles within the organizations that your scientific background is going to help you, but there are other very different type of roles, and you never know what the role might be that you have experience in, but doesn't require that PhD. And that very much happens within the regulatory area of our, and the biotech breeding organization. There's many other roles that do not require a PhD.
Yeah, and I agree, Natalie. It's kind of like the job responsibilities will really determine the degree level. And what I found in my role is that I'm interacting with people that have bachelors or that have masters or have PhD all pretty regularly. For my role, it did require a PhD, and if you think about the responsibilities, there's a lot of collaboration and communication that has to happen in this position. Also, making sure that all these studies are done, and so maintaining those relationships, getting the data that we need, helping with data analysis, and then finally pulling that all together into our IRM or durability plan. So when you think about it that way, it's almost, it's very similar, and it reminds me to the process of almost like a dissertation, right? So I think it makes sense, why this position required a PhD, but I agree with Natalie. I think it just depends on the responsibilities, and even though I'm in a PhD role, I very much interact with roles with those that have masters and bachelors too.
Thank you, guys. I want to be very mindful of your time, so I'm just going to ask one last question and then we'll wrap this up. Building off of that conversation, some job openings require a bachelor's or master's degree. I have a PhD, which is overqualified. Can or should I still apply? And how do you guys consider these applications?
That's a very good question as well. I would definitely apply. So even though there is a PhD, if you're a recent grad, coming right out of academia, first job out of industry, the role might be open to somebody that is a PhD. Sometimes they will not, and the only reason that that we will not, we'll always look and review candidates on, like I said, a regular playing field. But we also don't want to bring you in for a role that's not going to challenge you or is not going to give you the correct income for what you have basically paid your dues into earning a PhD. So we want to make sure that the role that you come in at, that it's challenging for you, that you're going to go up in your career, and to make sure that it's a good fit. So I can't really be specific because every opportunity and role that we post is a little bit different, but some of them will look at PhDs, Some of them just wrote if you're definitely overly qualified, because we don't want to waste your time or the company's time.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, I think we want to wrap things up since I know we're already past the hour and I really want to be mindful
Sure,
of the time.
I apologize for that. So we just want to move on to a quick thank you, and thanking Aaron and ESA for the time today. We hope everyone was able to take something valuable away with them today. And if you know anybody that would be interested in attending another event like this, there are going to be other events and seminars through ESA, but also in the ESA conference coming up, Bayer has 2 different seminars that we're going to provide, one on November 13th and one on November 20th. These are going to be chat session seminars. The candidate would need, or student would need to sign up for these. But it's going to be a very, very similar seminar to this. So if you know of anybody who's interested, please refer them to that. And I want to thank you for your time today. Anything else, Erin?
No, that's it. Thank you both for participating today. We really appreciate all the incredible advice you shared with our attendees. And thank you all for joining us today. We wish you a great afternoon, day, and look forward to seeing you at the ESA annual meeting. Thank you all, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.